Hello, this is the third chapter of Bernard the Brave, being read for a second grade class, and this video is coming to you from Colorado. It's the first of our videos coming from Colorado, so make sure you have watched the videos for chapters 1 and 2 before beginning this video. I would like for you to review what you have done so far in your reading log or reading notes, so that you are prepared for learning something new today about our characters and what's going on with Bernard and finding the missing girl that Nicodemus has come to him with a problem about. So review those 2 pages, set up your new page for chapter 3, and once you have done that, press play on the video and it will continue to the story. Don't forget to watch till the end of the video to get the new listening questions, which you can turn in to me on Monday. Hey, second graders. So today is coming to you from Colorado. This is my childhood home. And we are going to be reading the 3rd chapter of Bernard the Brave. We just left Bernard leaving Nicodemus to go and search for our missing girl. So let's get started. Remember, to pause the video at any time to write down new and interesting words, predictions, or questions you might have going forward. Okay, chapter 3. The biggest house on Grand Boulevard. It was just as well he'd taken his mackintosh, for the winter evening was cold and drizzly. In fact, the drizzle soon turned into a fine but penetrating rain. So a penetrating rain is the kind of rain that really sticks to you, like you don't get dry, it chills you to the bone. Bernard was actually rather glad of it, as he turned up his collar and hurried on, for it kept people and cats indoors, and he didn't wish to attract notice or be seen. The only disadvantage was that the raindrops so blurred his glasses, he had to keep taking them off and wiping them. Even so, but a foggy view of each enormous house, so it's a spectrum word, it's not just big, it's enormous. He could tell the supermarket all right, from its large plate glass windows stuffed with breakfast foods and tinned salmon. Otherwise, from a mouse level, each house on Grand Boulevard looked as big as the next. Bernard had to judge simply by the width of their doorstep, but one doorstep was so unmistakably widest of all. So he's judging the places by how big their doorsteps are, and he's found one that's really big. So Bernard is making an assumption. What kind of assumption is he making? One doorstep was so unmistakably widest of all. Up he confidently nipped. Then what met his view? The lower panels of a great shut oaken door, just like the door of a prison. This is where Miss Thomasina is incarcerated. That word means being held. That is where Miss Thomasina is incarcerated, all right, thought Bernard. But how on earth do I get in? This would be a great moment to stop and write down a prediction about how you think Bernard is going to get into the house. His experience of prisons, however, had taught him that however rebarbative their frontage, there was often a weakness in the back. That word rebarbative means irritating. So no matter how irritating or scary or anything that the front of the house might be, there's often a weakness in the back of the house or in the back of a prison. So down he ran again and nosed cautiously around the building's huge bulk, where his expectations were fulfilled by the sight of several overflowing dustbins. Those are trash cans. Outside a smaller, more homely entrance. In fact, the dustbin so overflowed, the back door was so jammed ajar by cartons and waste paper, Bernard was easily able to slip in. So I want you to stop and think for a minute. Why is the author taking all this time to describe the dustbins? Do you think that will be important later on, or is that just to build the visual of what this house looks like? And was Bernard right? First into the cellar, then into a boiler room. So loudly roared the incinerator in the boiler room, Bernard skirted it respectfully and perceived behind it a door ajar, opening onto a narrow staircase. 'Twas a toilsome climb indeed he had to undertake, for the stone steps, though worn, were still very steep. And Bernard thought regretfully of the service lifts at the embassy. So a service lift is like an elevator. If it's as tough going all the way up to the attics, thought Bernard, I shall be too breathless to speak even one reassuring word to Miss Thomasina. As the staircase on the first landing, he passed a green baize door on either side of which he could tell by the smells was obviously the kitchen. So a baize door is like a thick curtain. So instead of being a wooden door that you can open and shut, it's like a curtain panel that you can kind of push your way through. Where there probably would be a service lift. Bernard was very much tempted to slip in and chance his luck, but he knew how heavy-handed cooks could be at the sight of a mouse, and prudently resigned himself to continuing upward. So, how did Bernard know that that was the kitchen? And why doesn't he want to go in and see that if there's a service lift or not? And resign means he's convinced or he's sure, but not really wanting to be. He's like, fine. Okay. Up toiled Bernard past a second green baize door, and when he came to a third, felt he must surely have reached the attics at last. So he went up one level, he went up another level, and he gets to the third floor of the building, and he's like, this has to be it. Pausing only to wipe his spectacles, Bernard pushed through it and entered. Obviously, not an attic. It was one of the biggest rooms Bernard had ever seen. It was bigger than the ambassadress's drawing room. But a drawing room, it certainly wasn't either. It contained 20 little white beds, neatly arranged in 2 rows of 10, with beside each a locker or playbox, and upon each a little white nightgown, neatly folded. Where's Bernard? It took several moments to realize the truth. For the first moment, he had just thought that Miss Thomasina's wicked guardian must have an exceptionally fine family. Families of 20 are nothing to a mouse. Then he recalled that human families are usually limited to 5 or 6 at the most, and then of varying ages. 20 little daughters, all the same age, by the size of their beds and nightgowns, were surely beyond the power of human reproduction. What is he realizing? Well, where is he? Also, Nicodemus had said nothing of Miss Thomasina's guardian even being married. At last it dawned. It wasn't Miss Thomasina's guardian's townhouse he'd penetrated with such pains, but the boarding school for young ladies. So a boarding school, we don't have as many of them here in the United States, but in England and other places, a boarding school was where children lived at schools. So if you went to a boarding school, you lived there for the entire duration of the school year. And you went home for summers and Christmas breaks if you were so lucky. So a lot of children went to a boarding school where they lived at the school. Would you like to be in a boarding school? Would you like to live at school with all of your teachers instead of going home? I sure wouldn't have. I liked coming home at the end of every school day. And just as light did dawn, in scampered 20 little girls, come to tidy themselves up before supper. To Bernard, there seemed at least 40 of them as they ran in, giggling and squealing and enjoying a brief interval of release from under the eyes of their teachers. Some were blonde, some brunette, one carroty. Some had their hair in pigtails, some in ringlets, and some in bangs, but oh my goodness, how they all giggled and squealed. Bernard's wits were quite bemused, and instead of making for cover, he stood where he was obvious to every eye, in the middle of the floor. So bemused means he was both confused and amused at the same time. So he was both like, what's going on? And thought it was pretty funny all at the same time. But why is he staying in the middle of the floor? Why isn't he scampering to hide? And did the young ladies show any fear of him? Not they. It may be remembered, flashback, that Miss Bianca, attacking the Diamond Castle to rescue a little girl called Patience, had based her entire strategy on the hypothesis that the Diamond Duchess's ladies-in-waiting, at first sight of the mouse, would immediately jump on chairs. So what does that tell you about the reaction that Bernard is expecting from the 20 girls in the boarding school? But the young ladies seemed to have been made of sterner stuff. Some of their brothers kept ferrets, after all. They clustered toward Bernard with cries of positive enthusiasm. "Why, look, there's a mouse!" cried all the little girls, apparently quite unaware that if they'd had any true feminine sensibility, they should have been jumping on chairs. Actually, there weren't any chairs in the dormitory, but they could have jumped on their beds. "Oh, isn't he cute?" cried all the little girls. "Isn't he cunning?" They passed so close, Bernard was absolutely hemmed in by plimsolls. Hemmed in by plimsolls means he was blocked by shoes, so they're pinning him into a corner. And since in any unusual circumstances it is always best to stick to conventions, he took 2 steps back and then 1 forward and pulled on his whiskers. "Why, look, he's been trained," cried all the little girls. "Oh, isn't he darling? Isn't he a perfect pet?" Bernard had never felt such a fool in his entire life. "Why, let's keep him for a pet!" cried all the little girls excitedly. "But we aren't allowed pets," said a prim-looking girl in pigtails. "If the head mistress found him, then she mustn't," cried Carity. "Don't be such a spoil sport. I know where we'll keep him. In my play box. It's got holes in the lid where my brother tried out an electric drill and nothing inside but an old teddy bear. We'll put him in my box and feed him cheese from our suppers and take him out to play with in the dormitory here at night." This brilliant plan was at once agreed to, and within moments Bernard found himself popped into one of the big wooden boxes and heard the lid slam down, and then after hastily tidying themselves, all the young ladies ran off giggling. Uh-oh. "Here's a pretty kettle of sardine tails," thought Bernard grimly. For though he pushed with all his might, he couldn't raise the heavy wooden lid by so much as half an inch, and the holes bored by Carity's brother weren't big enough for even a mouse to squeeze through. What's Bernard's problem? What's wrong here? It was true, he might have been worse off. At least he wasn't going to suffocate, nor was he likely to starve, if the little girls remembered to bring back enough cheese. But small consolation was either circumstance to Bernard, set out to rescue an imprisoned young lady, and now a prisoner himself. Meanwhile, Miss Bianca, for her part, wasn't finding her hands nearly so full as she'd expected. I'm going to stop. This is a literary device used by a lot of authors. So, we've left Bernard stuck in a situation he can't get out of. And so we're kind of left on the edge of our seat going, what's happening to Bernard? And instead of answering that question, the author has switched to the other main character of the story. So we've left Bernard stuck in a box. We have no idea if he's going to get out. And instead of telling us, the author is going to now tell us about Bianca. And if we remember the last time we heard about Bianca, she was off to the Swiss Alps with the ambassador's son to help him recover from a bad case of the mumps. So let's find out what Bianca's been up to. Meanwhile, Miss Bianca, for her part, wasn't finding her hands nearly so full as she expected. The mountain resort where the ambassadress had taken a villa or chalet, a big castle-like house, was one of the most beautiful spots imaginable. High, snow-covered peaks surrounded a wide, smooth lake that reflected the blue of a perpetually cloudless sky. Perpetually means always, so an always cloudless sky. The fir trees, under their load of melting ice for the sun, after each frosty night, shone punctually all day, looked like Christmas trees. All the trees are just always covered in snow. As for the bracingness of the air, it was so remarkably bracing that the boy quite recovered almost as soon as he got there, and had no need of Miss Bianca to help keep him amused. What do you suppose the word bracing means, and how does it relate to the type of air in these mountains, and how is it different than the air at home? There was naturally no bathing in the lake, but there was water skiing on it, just as there was proper skiing on the mountain slopes, and the boy, as he grew stronger and stronger, began to take part in both these sports. He also began to make friends with other children, whose parents had taken chalets around them. And the ambassadress was pleased to see it, for thoroughly as she appreciated Miss Bianca's qualities, she sometimes felt that a white mouse was not quite adequate as her son's best friend, and was glad to see him in the company of other boys and girls. As the boy soon came to be from the moment he finished breakfast till he was reluctantly put to bed. So reluctantly means he didn't really want to go to bed, but he did it anyway. There were other amusements, too, at the mountain resort. Sometimes one of the big hotels put on a concert or a fancy dress dance. Once a whole traveling circus briefly pitched its tents, and then what excitement! Besides the circus proper, there were all sorts of sideshows. In one, an old lady told fortunes. In another, a mustachioed old man and a lad played on hurdy-gurdies. Hurdy-gurdies are a string instrument that plays by turning a handle, to accompany a pair of waltzing mice. I know of a mouse in this story that used to be a waltzing mouse, and that was Nicodemus. A waltzing mouse means that they dance. A waltzing mouse dances to the music. The boy nearly fetched Miss Bianca to see them. Then he reflected that that sight might upset her. The poor mice looked so tired. For of course the boy didn't actually neglect Miss Bianca. As soon as they got to the chalet, he made a very nice nest for her in a drawer lined with clean handkerchiefs and never forgot to change them. He also took her for a promenade each morning on the windowsill. A promenade means a walk. Brought her up cheese and biscuits after lunch, and before going to sleep always saw that beside his own glass of water by the bed, there was a little saucerful for Miss Bianca, in case she was thirsty in the night. The ambassadress kept an eye on her too, and often looked in to report the boy's progress toward complete recovery. But the fact remained that Miss Bianca was bored stiff. As usual, she found a resource in poetry, but the poem she wrote after a week at the mountain resort was quite unlike her usual sort of verse. So what's Bianca's problem? what can you predict about what she might do given the way she feels about being in the villa? Okay. The unusual poem written by Miss Bianca while staying at a mountain resort. So here is Bianca's poem. Without, how white the snow, how blue the sky. Blue, too, the lake that ripples to the shore. All nature smiles. Alas, ungrateful, I too wish for something more. Without, the moon in beauty rides on high. Bright, frosty starlets twinkle by the score. All nature dreams in bliss. Ungrateful I, to find all nature just one great big bore. When Miss Bianca reread the poem, she tore it up. But it had undoubtedly been expressive of her feelings at the time. Also expressive of her feelings was another shorter poem written by Miss Bianca a little later. Shorter poem written by Miss Bianca. Oh, Bernard, are you quite well? Oh, Bernard, are you all right? You will water my garden, I know. I shall find every flower a blow. But are you quite well and all right out of my sight? So, what does this second poem tell you about Miss Bianca's feelings? It said that it was very reflective of her feelings, and the first poem was reflective of how she felt about how boring being out in the villa was. So what does this poem tell about her feelings, and about who? How Bernard would have rejoiced to read those simple but heartfelt lines, proving that Miss Bianca really cared for him. Of course, he was quite well, but by no stretch of the imagination could have been called all right, seeing as how he was imprisoned at that very moment when Miss Bianca set pen to paper in a locker in the dormitory of a young ladies' boarding school. Bum, bum, bum. So that is the end of chapter 3. You'll have to tune in next time to find out what's Miss Bianca going to do now that she's bored. What is Bernard going to do trapped in a shoebox? Hopefully some of these questions will be answered next time. But in the meantime, go ahead and finish writing down anything you need. Finish that somebody wanted but so then, so you can review what happened in this chapter before watching the next video. And don't forget to answer the listening questions, which are coming up right now. And don't forget to write down your answers on the back of that reading log page. I would love to read your thoughts and answers when we get back to school on Monday. So, I will see you soon.